Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that it really helps to get my channel promoted, and I appreciate it. I also love if you leave a comment. I like to hear constructive criticism. I like to hear ideas for videos, just what you think in general of things. And I also love to hear how you do things, because that's always interesting to me. Um, So I've had this chrysoprase cab for a long time that I've been sitting on, and on Patreon every month I give them a kind of a theme topic to make a piece based on, and this month's topic is sea life. And so I thought that I would make a jellyfish pendant out of this. This piece of chrysoprase that I have is sort of maybe a 2/3 of a circle that it looks like maybe the lapidary, when he was cutting it, broke the stone and then went ahead and change the shape of it because of that, so that it's kind of 2/3 of a circle, and it looks perfect for the bell of a jellyfish. So I'm going to give that a try today and see how that turns out. Before we do, I wanted to thank some people. I wanted to thank my patrons over on Patreon, and I have a new one, Joyce McSee. Thanks for signing up. I really appreciate your support. And I think that you're going to find that the people over there are a super nice group with a lot of knowledge, and I hope that you enjoy interacting with them as much as I do. Um, I really appreciate not only the financial support that my patrons give me, I appreciate the nice community that they've built over there, so thank you for that. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and I really appreciate them as well. We just passed 13,500, I believe, was the last benchmark. And that's awesome and amazing. And some of the comments you guys leave are really amazing and truly moving, so thank you for that. It makes me really happy to know that people are finding these useful and helping to inspire them either to get back into this or to start this. So thank you for that, and thanks for the financial support as well, like the buy me a coffee and the super thanks. That really helps with the rising cost of silver. So with those things being said, let's get started on this video. This is one of my design idea books, which are available on my merch store. The more recent ones have some different conversion charts on the back. This one is fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters, which I find pretty useful. So there's also one that has American wire gauge to millimeters, because I know a lot of people overseas don't use wire gauge like that. But I find it useful to draw up my designs in advance when I'm getting ready to do something. Here's today's idea. Let me show you the stone here. It's a little piece of chrysoprase, and it's relatively thin. But like I said, I think probably when they were cutting it, it broke, and so they just flattened this edge and then made it into kind of a semicircle. And so I'm going to use that. We're going to bezel set it. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 22 gauge sheet and make kind of a little narrow box, probably with rounded corners, that is going to be just as wide as the bottom of this. And I'll use 18 gauge wire to make some tentacles that come out, and I'll probably put a hidden bail on the back. And then we'll solder it all together. So we'll start by making the bezel for it. I'm using 3/16 inch bezel, which is 4.76 millimeters high. I probably will cut that shorter for the purpose of this because it's not a very thick stone. I do need some edge of the bezel there to mount this box made out of 22 gauge sheet as well. I'm using 26 gauge bezel thickness, which is 0.41 millimeters. 22 gauge sheet is about 0.66 millimeters thick, and 1.02 millimeters is the size of the wire, which is 18 gauge round wire. So I don't know what I'm going to use for the hidden bails on the back. Probably some, I don't know, 12 gauge half round or something like that, bent into little squares or rectangles for the chain to pass through, probably 2 of them. That makes for a nice hidden bail behind things. So I think that's going to be pretty cool looking, but we'll see. So let's start by making a bezel. And this is, like I said, it's 26 gauge, so it's a little thicker than some stuff that I use sometimes. All right. So
when I'm doing this, I'm not going to end the bezel on a corner here because it's hard to get it to bend right. So we're going to make a bend to start with, like that. Try and get it as close to that as we can. It's actually slightly more than half a circle here. Just file the second side flat. If you've never been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder for most things. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on mostly, or spray on, depending upon the situation. And my torch is a Silversmith model, which is their acetylene air torch, and it's a great torch for this. I use a #1 tip, trying to anticipate the questions people ask me all the time. So it looks like I have a little bit of solder here already that I cut earlier, so let's get this fluxed and solder it. I'm thinking this is probably going to be kind of an upper level beginner project. I guess we'll see. Doesn't seem like it should be too complex. I really wanted to thank all the people who've downloaded my design idea book that I published a little while back. It's a good way to support the channel, and I really appreciate it. If you haven't seen that, it's a guide to all of the videos I put out in 2023. And there likely will be one for 2024 as well. Once, if we make it through 2024, which I assume we will. It's really a kind of a convenient way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, because it's got a page for each of the videos, which includes my original sketch, like I have it there for this one, a list of materials you need to make the project, a difficulty rating that's kind of subjective on my part, and some notes that I made about the project, like, would I have changed the way I did it if I was to do it again, or what was the most challenging part of it, or some ideas for how I might modify it for future projects. Those kinds of things. There's a picture of the final product or products, if it's a multi-project video, and there's a link right to the video, so you can kind of check it out, and then click right on the link and watch the video, and then you can make it yourself. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link up there for you. Just kind of trying to get this shaped pretty well. That looks decent. I think we did okay size-wise. Okay, let's put a bottom on that. I'm going to use 26 gauge sheet for the bottom. I don't know if I wrote that on the sketch this time or not. Okay, I'll set him off to the side for the moment. I'm just going to throw quite a few pieces in there. And we'll kind of nudge them up against the side. Okay, the reason I leave a little lip on the outside is because the bottom sheet is harder to get up to temperature than the piece of bezel sitting on top of it, because it's less exposed to the flame than the bezel is. And so if you're having trouble as a beginner melting your bezels frequently, oftentimes it's because the bottom piece doesn't quite reach temperature before your bezel will start to melt. So if you have that little extra lip on the outside, it gives you kind of somewhere to pump some heat into it, versus if you tried to be frugal and do it just the same size as the bezel. So it kind of backfires on you when you're trying to save that sheet, even though we're just going to trim it off. That was one of those things that beginners oftentimes struggle with. And I occasionally still melt things, which is always a good time. I don't know. It's been my experience that, as frustrating as it is to have something go sideways on you, it's usually the best time to learn something new. If you stop and you think about what did I do that caused that to happen, and do some analysis, and usually you can figure it out why it did that. And that knowledge gives you that much more control for the next time. I'm just trimming it off flush to the bottom here, and then we'll file it. I want to file this down until it looks like a single piece of metal rather than two pieces soldered together. And so I need to smooth that base piece right into the side of the bezel like that. You need to be a little careful though that you don't hit the top of the bezel when you're doing this. As that bezel being relatively thin already, it can cause it to become paper thin and super fragile, so nobody wants that. We got our bell shape there. So let's cut a strip of 22 gauge sheet, and it needs to be a little more than twice as long as this, so just call it 40, and then we can trim it down after we kind of shape it. It doesn't need to be hugely deep, so I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily set a depth. I'd rather have too much than not enough, because I want to have plenty of room to lodge those pieces of wire in there. So I'm going to go about that wide, maybe slightly less. Like that. That's about 2.5, almost 3 millimeters. So that's a little wide for what we're going to do, because it needs to be more like 18 gauge. So we're going to be squeezing it down a bit. And then let's make a mark with the marker on where this one's going to go. Right there. That's pretty good. Okay, that's pretty good. I think before I solder this onto the bell, I think I need to put all those wires in there. And so I'm not sure how long I need to make this, so I'm going to have to kind of estimate, but I think it makes sense. I don't want any loose ends hanging down, so I'm going to have them kind of loop around here and then come back into that. But before I do that, I think I want this to be a little bit wavy. So I think I'm just going to use my Dremel with an abrasive white wheel. And maybe let's do this. Okay, let's go saw that. I think I have a number 1 on here, maybe. See how that works. Crude, but I removed enough material to where it'll make using the Dremel easier to kind of smooth that out. So that's going to be my next stage. Okay. That's reasonably good. We'll take that back and see what we can do with it. I'll likely have to do a little bit of shaping on the top of this too, make sure it has a nice attachment to that. But let's cut some pieces of 18 gauge round. Thinking I don't want it to be much longer than that, so there's going to be some swirls in it. So I think maybe the longest one's in the middle. I'm not sure how many I'm going to do, but let's do at least 4 or 6, I would think. So let's go at least 60 millimeters. 60 right there. Let's add a little bit more than that. Let's see where we're at. I'll cut a couple of those. Okay, so here's my thinking. It might be easiest if we sweat a little bit of solder onto the ends of these, and then once we have them the shape that we want, we can just jam those ends inside of this tube, or not tube, I should say, the slot there, and we'll reheat it till it flows, and then we'll have it soldered in there. So I'm going to pick a little tiny bit of solder on either end of those. I've never seen pick soldering before. It's a useful skill. I'll put a video up there for you. The trick to pick soldering is don't stick it in there until you think the thing is up to the soldering temperature, whatever you're trying to attach the solder to. So I think I'm going to insert one of these in here. Maybe this one too. Let's just heat those until that flows. Cool that off. I'm thinking I'm just going to kind of randomly do some curly cues on this, different sizes. Okay, maybe add a couple more. I'll straighten that out a little bit more. It's not very pleasing right the way it is, but I needed to bend it a little bit to get it to sit where I wanted it to. Maybe two more, and then we'll call it good. I rather like that. I might pick a little bit of extra solder in there to make sure nothing pops out on me. Okay. I think it's probably unlikely that anything's going to pop out of there now. Now we have to connect it to this. In order to do that, probably need to fine-tune that a bit. So I'm going to use the Dremel to just gently shape it with an abrasive white wheel so that it matches perfectly. And then I think probably the easiest way to do this would be to push this into a magnesia block so that this is flush, and just solder it together that way. That way we'll get it nice and even with the top there. So I'll be right back. So you can see I've got it lined up like this. I pushed the bezel into this magnesia block, which is a softer surface, and I elevated the bottom a little bit in order to tip it up that way so that it's touching nicely along the whole length. I should be able to just flux that and throw some solder on there and get it to flow pretty well. So let's see. The only disadvantage about magnesia, well, a couple of disadvantages. One is that they're crumbly and they kind of make a big mess when you pull things out of them. And the other is that when you bury part of your silver into something that insulates it from the heat, it makes it more difficult to get a good solder joint, because with silver you generally have to get the entire piece up to the temperature you want it to be for the solder to flow, whatever kind of solder you're using. So that's why I'm pumping a lot of heat into this bezel here, because a lot of that's buried. So I'm trying to get them both to hit temperature pretty close to the same time frame. Looks like they're doing okay. I'm going to add a little more solder if I can find some here. What do you think? Starting to look like a jellyfish? I think it is. I like that. That's pretty cool. All right. So the last thing really before we pickle this is I need to put a veil on it of some sort. I thought with the jellyfish, you kind of just kind of hovering there, like it's floating in the at depth in the water. And so having it have a hidden veil and just look like it's kind of sitting atop the chain, I thought that would be nice. And to do that, where's my pencil? There it is. Basically, if this is the back of our stone here, I'm going to create 2 of those like that out of some, probably some skinny half-round wire if I can find some, so I'll be right back. That looks pretty close. So I think let's just let's flux it, and then you can either lay a couple of pieces of solder touching those, or you can pick it in there. Either one, it's kind of your prerogative. So I think I'll probably pick them just because I'm used to doing that. So again, I'm soldering something pretty small to something that has become a little more massive. So most of the heat needs to go into this bottom piece. These little guys on top are pretty exposed, so they get hot pretty easily. So even if you get it to flow, if it just jumps onto the little loops because they've reached temperature, but the other piece hasn't, your piece isn't going to stick down anyway. So then where will you be? You'll be in cold solder joint chaos. Let's see where we're at. So from the front, I tried to put them real close to the top, and you can see there's the tip of them sticking out, so I will file those so that they just match. And then I'll double check that I have a good solder joint there, which it looks like I think I do. But I'll certainly check after it cleans up, just to make sure everything's attached securely before I polish and stuff. So I'll polish it, and then I'll bring it back and we'll set the stone, and then we'll take some better pictures. So right now I think I'm going to let it pickle for a bit. So I do this last stage a little differently than some. Most people use a bezel pusher and a burnishing tool. I use the side of my chain nose pliers and then the polished outer edge here to burnish with. So I've already put some tag board behind it to raise it up a little bit. And then now I'm going to just kind of like straight in while I'm pushing down here. Just going to push that straight in. I'm going to do a little burnishing. That's where you kind of rub that top edge. I really lay it down. I'll probably clean up the top of the bezel just a little bit with a fine, blue fine silicone polishing wheel, and then I'll find a chain and we'll take some pictures of it. So, I like how that turned out. That's fun. All right.
Okay, well that was the Jellyfish Pendant. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And before you leave also, why don't you take a moment and check out some of the other videos that I have. I have a huge catalog of videos now. It's 366 or so last time I looked. So there's content that's all different levels, and I think there's almost certainly something you'll find useful or enjoyable. So check those out, watch a few, like them, and then come back and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. The other thing is, make sure to check out the video description down below. There's some relevant links. If you're interested in Patreon, there's a link to that, and you can check out what's available over there in that community. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get one of those nice design idea books. There's a link to my ebook, which I just published, which is that guide to the 2023's videos, and that's a great way to have a whole bunch of tutorials right at your fingertips. I'm also now an affiliate of Pepe Tools, so there's a link to Pepe Tools down there. If you click on that and buy something, it helps me out. All right, well, thank you for stopping by. Come back again and take care. Happy silversmithing.